tone. I go to UNC Chapel Hill. I'm a junior, and I did the Maymester in Florence in 2023.
Do you have any tips for budgeting while abroad?
I'd say my biggest one is do make a spreadsheet if you can before you go. Obviously, you want to plan out your food, and that, in my experience, was you could spend anywhere from €1 to up to €5 for a good sized breakfast, around €5 for a panini for lunch, which they're totally big enough for lunch, and then anywhere from 15 to 25 for dinner if you're going to a sit down restaurant. Dinner is typically the most expensive meal in Florence, but I found that those parameters were pretty applicable regardless of the location I went. And then I'd also say just make sure you're tracking like your travel and like little things you're spending on, because like if you get a gelato here and there, it does add up. So, just trying to plan, like maybe you want one sweet a day, and you don't eat as much, then you have extra money left over. But planning for that, and then also the cost of trains does go up the closer in time you leave. So make sure if you know where you want to go, you book that in advance, so it's a little cheaper. And I would always say book it on the Omeo app. It's easy and you don't have to validate your ticket. And you don't typically need a first class seat. I always get whatever the regular seat is, and I've never had an issue finding a seat on a train. So those are my budgeting tips.
What did your day-to-day look like on your program?
So I'd say typically I had a fairly typical schedule day-to-day, just it was easier. So I'd wake up and I'd walk down the street. I lived in Social Hub, so I'd walk down the street to a local coffee shop. I'd grab coffee and then a schiacciata, which is like a harder focaccia. So it was just like my bread of choice for breakfast, but they have pastries too. And then I'd go back up to the Social Hub and I'd go to the gym. The gym has a gorgeous view of Florence as a city, so highly recommend going to the gym just for the views. And so I'd go to the gym and then I'd shower and I'd head out to walk around the city with friends. Or sometimes I'd even go to museums by myself just to see what they're like. Sometimes the museums can be expensive, so that might not be in everyone's budget, but I highly recommend going to see the Uffizi Gallery and the gallery where David is at, because again, I think those are once in a lifetime experiences. So I do some of that from the middle of the day and then stop somewhere to get a panini. And then I'd head back to the Social Hub and pick up one of my friends for class. We had class at 3:20. And it was a 3-hour class, which sounds long, but it really did not take, it did not feel that long. We also were in a walking class. And so we were walking around Florence, looking at the different architecture of different periods. And so I really enjoyed that. And then we would head back to the Social Hub, change, and go out to dinner. Dinner didn't start until at least 7 in Florence, and so that's definitely something to be cognizant of. Americans obviously have dinner usually earlier than that, so it's never hard to get the 7 o'clock reservation, but if you want like an 8 or 9, those can be a little more difficult to get. And then we come back, and then if you want to go out afterwards, that is typically around 10.
How did the roommate process work on your program?
So I believe once you were registered for the program, you got sent an email asking about your roommate preferences. And everyone filled that out regardless of if you wanted a single or a double. Typically, people get doubles, but if there's room for singles or you have a special accommodation, you can get a single. I requested a single personally just because I didn't know anyone going the trip, and so I figured I wouldn't want to be with a random roommate. However, that being said, all the people that got paired with random roommates seemed to love them. So I think the process was really great. The form took into account, when you went to sleep, what are like your clean, how clean are you, other things like that, and what personalities you think you'd mesh best with. And so I think the process was really good for matching. And the room setup was the same. We had 2 twin beds and a bathroom and then a little closet area. That was the same regardless if you had a single or a double.
How did you go about finding the courses you need for your major?
So before I went to study abroad, I looked on my university's website to see if anyone had studied abroad with CIS abroad or Florence University of Arts specifically, to see if there's any transfer credits that had already been approved by my department to go over. There had not been, which was not an issue. I emailed my department head saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this program. What are the likelihoods you would accept the credit? They're like, as long as it doesn't have wine or alcohol in it, they can accept it if it's in Italy for my Italian major. So I was off to the races at that point, registered on Florence University of the Arts website. And their website, once you register as a student, they give you the different course options. And so I was able to read through those. And I was deciding between a food walking course around the city, which sounded really cool, and then medieval architecture. And at the time, I hadn't declared my medieval and early modern studies minor, but I was thinking I was going to. So I ended up taking that course, knowing it would count for the Italian major at bare minimum, but thinking I could probably get it counted for my medieval minor. And then once my credit was transferred back to UNC after the program, I was able to reach out to the medieval minor department and get that approved. So I will just say, make sure you do your work on the front end to ask if it will be approved. And again, they can't guarantee it, but they can say yes, based on what you've done, this is likely to be approved. But typically you'll need a syllabus to send them so they can get an idea of whether or not it's approved. But I had no issue in figuring that out. Everything was pretty transparent.